Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, Eliminate Paper at Your Front Door with Intelligent Digital Mailroom. I'm Teresa Resick, Vice President of Market Intelligence here at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of our webinar. And Iron Mountain is the underwriter of our event, and we thank them very much for their support, and certainly thank you for taking the time to join us today. Now, as we get started, I just want to offer a few tips so that you can participate in our webinar. Look to the chat feature. Please go ahead and open that up right now and let us know where you're listening from. We always like to know where around the world folks are. And in this chat, this is where we're going to drop links in there for you throughout the day. One of them will be for the resources that we have to share, a PDF of some helpful information and in forms of slides. The PDF of slides will be in there, but certainly some other really cool resources from AIIM and the folks at Iron Mountain. We do encourage you to ask questions of our speakers, whether you use the Q&A feature or chat. We'll be here monitoring those and taking your questions. We will be holding them towards the end, and we will have 5 or 10 minutes to have a really good discussion. So ask those questions as you think of them, and we will get to that in our webcast. Also, as things conclude today, there will be a feedback survey. We're going to share the link with you right now, but also just feel free to let us know what you thought of what we're doing today, offer suggestions on what else, other learning type of opportunities you'd like to have, other topics you want to hear about, but just always looking to get your feedback on what we're doing here. And this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIM.org's Resources Learning Center webpage in just a few days. So I'm pleased to introduce our host that we have with us today. Kevin Crane is AIM's content strategist, and Kevin authors ebooks and infographics on a wide variety of intelligent information management and digital transformation topics. He is the producer and host of AIM on Air, and as a podcast series that was recently listed on Forrester's 100 Best Channel Podcasts of 2021. So very pleased to turn things over to Kevin to begin our talk today. Hey, Kevin.
Hi, Teresa. Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to be back for another great AIM webinar, this time with Iron Mountain. So great to hear and see everyone. We have got folks from Texas, Detroit, Alberta, Fairbanks, Boston, New Jersey, and even Kenya today. And there were more as they were going by so quickly. I want to welcome everybody, and it's really my pleasure to host today. We're going to be talking about a digital mailroom. And I think it's an important topic because a goal for many organizations is to remove or reduce their reliance on paper. And this is especially valuable and especially impactful when it comes to the mailroom. With today's remote workforce, getting the mail to the right staff presents a challenge, to say the least. And a mailroom is a big part of operations. So what can be done to bring the mailroom into the digital transformation age? The mailroom is clearly evolving. What does it take to be a 21st century mailroom operations? That's what we'll be exploring today with our guest from Iron Mountain, who will share how leading organizations today are digitally transforming their mailroom operations to accelerate access to information and enhance customer experience, all while delivering better efficiencies and cost effectiveness. So today, through some practical guidance and some case examples, we'll learn about a modern approach to digitally transforming mailroom operations that will help drive increased customer engagement through digital channels, eliminate paper-based processing and costly mundane tasks, reduce our capital expenditures and our real estate expenditures, and all the while identify and deliver process efficiencies and automation that really make a difference. So with that, I'd like to welcome our guest today, Peter Nickel. Peter is a principal advisor with Iron Mountain, and he's worked within the technology and financial services sector for over 20 years, including with companies like IBM and Xerox and others. Most recently, he has been focused on automation, intelligent machine learning technologies for information management, and the Iron Mountain Insight platform. And Peter works with clients and internal teams to design internal strategies and initiatives and make those really actionable so that they drive ROI and revenue. So it's my pleasure really to have Peter here with us today. Welcome, Peter. Welcome aboard.
Thanks, Kevin. Very excited to be here. Thank you very much.
All right, so we're here to talk about a digital mailroom. Now, exactly what is a digital mailroom? What defines the operation versus what we would think of in a traditional mailroom?
Yeah. So when we think about a traditional mailroom, it's basically those historical images that we have of very physical assets being manually handled and processed, and very linear in terms of the process that happens. If we intake a physical asset, people have to manually look at it, understand what it is, and it moves off down a line or a sequence of events to physically end up at one end stage. And so that's kind of the traditional things. And if you think about the challenges with that, you're really constrained by simple challenges like real estate, but also the number of resources, the time and motion of those physical assets, accessing those assets. And then again, if we end up only at one endpoint, if somebody else within an organization needs to leverage that asset, it starts off a whole other chain again. So you can start to see a lot of the constraints around a traditional. When we think about a digital mailroom, we're allowing for some digital transformation. So that's where we're able to now capture either an already digitized asset. So if something comes in via email, or the moment that a physical asset comes in, rather than manually handling it, the first thing we do is we digitize it. And then we can work on it through different systems and software user interfaces. The benefit to that is a couple of things. Now, off a single asset, you can have multiple people working on it. You can access it remotely. And this really allows for much more operational efficiency, speed and scale of access to that data. And then the other part is business continuity, right? You're really physically limited when you have a single point of access to data. This allows for much more disaster recovery and business continuity. And as you can imagine, just as we go into it, that was a big benefit to our clients as they went through COVID.
Yeah, tell me more about that. I can imagine. All right, I have incoming mail into my organization. It's coming in the basement, right? And it's coming and going using, inserters, and there's piles of paper. A lot of this stuff still comes and goes. So all of a sudden now COVID hits and all my folks are not on site anymore. So tell me about how those digital transformation or that digital mailroom technique really helped organizations during the height of COVID.
Yeah, and I think you hit on an important part. The main challenge that our clients faced was just around the access to the facilities and the documents themselves, right? And I think we had been working across multiple industries towards this concept of a digital mailroom. Nobody really likes getting in a ton of mail and having to work through it, but it's a reality. There was a threshold of tolerance to change that. And much like a lot of things globally, the pandemic really accelerated that need for change. And so when we couldn't get in and access those documents and they started piling up, the impact was quite obvious, right? It caused significant challenges for client servicing, right? So if there were documents that were relied upon for transactional processing or servicing to a client, and we were able to do it, we are now giving a very limited amount of time to be able to do that. The other part that we saw, and this is to be expected, but a bigger challenge even above that was around regulatory legislation and compliance, right? So a lot of these documents and the data within it have very specific requirements to how it gets processed, how it gets turned around, and how long it can sit. And so while we were worried about how we were servicing clients and we were trying to get around by creating more omni-channel or virtual capabilities to do so, we were maybe a little bit behind on understanding the regulatory and compliance impact and the information governance around it. So what we saw was the main thing was, how do we get access to these documents that are coming in when we're significantly challenged to not be able to do so? And so that was where, Iron Mountain, I feel, was very uniquely positioned to be able to help with our clients on this concept of dealing with it. And so if the biggest constraint is getting access to the documents and being able to process it, well, that's where we want to go within the supply chain to deal with it. So we quickly worked with our clients to reroute mail. And we weren't alone in this. This was our approach to it, is we rerouted the mail to our facilities where we had the ability to have staff on site to digitize them, apply some rudimentary knowledge based on our organization's requirements, and then give them remote access to those documents to then be able to work on them the way that they normally would. And the other part of this was all about expediency and speed, right? And so what this really showed ourselves and our clients is we could get to that first phase or that emergency phase of a digital mailroom relatively quickly when the requirement was there.
I see. Okay, so what you're saying is we're taking your incoming mail, we're rerouting it to another physical location, and then at that point, staff is opening it up, and then what happens to it? It gets scanned, and how does that work? I mean, tell me the chain of process sort of there. I'm now taking my mail, not from coming into Portland, Oregon. I'm shifting it over to wherever the facility is, that Iron Mountain runs. And then what happens to it?
Yeah. So what we do is, and again, each client is a little bit different in terms of the requirements around the mail, but its most simplistic approach is we would then open the mail, scan the envelopes and the documents themselves, apply some tags to them based on the way that the organization would route mail or look to go to a specific queue or mailbox or line of business perspective. And then, there's multiple ways that we could do that. We could leverage their systems, but what most folks looked for was a centralized data repository that was easy to search against, could apply specific rules and authentications to it. So now you could have multiple people go in the moment that the mail was received and scanned and be able to search across it and access those documents. And what's nice too is, again, getting back into the digital point of that, is the obvious thing is now multiple people can access that document at point of reception, right? And that's very, very important, as we're finding more and more organizations are realizing the value of data outside of a singular transaction.
I can see how that would and must have been super helpful and valuable, an emergency digital mailroom service, if you will. And indeed, depending on where I was in my organization in terms of digification, if that's a word, may indeed have then opened the door to a much more paperless process that maybe I hadn't considered or been able to implement yet, even on an emergency basis, or maybe perhaps what we might consider a fairly rudimentary basis. But ultimately, you folks talk about a digital mailroom. It's really more than that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the broader picture of what a modern digital mailroom is and can represent to us today?
Yeah. So when we think of digital mailroom, it's kind of what we said there. It's getting things to a digital point of view where people can access the documents and work off them. But it's not a fundamental change to the process in and of itself, right? We're still going to be relying on people to look at the digital asset. Now they can access it remotely, and we have the ability to do some metadata tagging and extend that out. But it's still essentially the same process. Where the evolution is going and where we're excitedly being able to talk to this is looking at leveraging different sorts of technologies. So those could be content service platforms. They will absolutely leverage things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotic process automation. And when we get to that point, we are now turning this from being a traditional mailroom or even a digital mailroom into an intelligent document processing center. And what I mean by that is, when we leverage these technologies, we're now able to automate the capturing of documents, both physical and digital, the classification and understanding of what that document is, the extraction of data from that, so different entity points or different types of information off of it, apply proper business rules, and then in a parallel fashion, route that data out. So what we're enabling is an omni-channel capture of information documents that will change the way that we work with our supply chain, our clients, our partners, so that if we want to enable them to still mail in physical assets, because in some cases that will still be there, both from a regulatory perspective or just a reality of the where we are today. Email, mobile applications, private client portals, any of those things. We're now enabling people to send in digital assets, and we're creating a very consistent aggregated approach to that data. And now the mailroom goes from being kind of that traditional single port that we think of to, at any type of data that enters the organization, we can capture at that inception reception point and start processing it immediately. And putting them into back-end applications and workflows and data repositories and advanced data modeling and platforms, close to straight through processing. The benefits of that are enormous to our clients, right? We're now enabling different ways for them to communicate and work and enable more real-time communication strategies with their clients, which is where we're all going, right? I call it the Amazonification of the pandemic. We're all so used now to sitting on our couch at 2 a.m. and being able to put it in order and having immediate line of sight to where that is within that transaction is within the supply chain, when I'm going to receive it, open and transparent communication on that, and we receive it relatively quick. Well, we expect that now with every interaction we have with any client anywhere, right? The moment I send something out or I put forward an operation or a transaction, I want immediate communication and resolution to that. So to do that, we really do have to transform the way that we capture and process and integrate information end to end, so that it's seamless across that. That's the only way to achieve it. And so long-winded way of saying, I think, when we look at things like the intelligent mailroom, it's a very phased approach to it. And this what we talked about is digital mailroom, and then steps on that are all part of that journey. But the excitement is when we can create almost a single entity of information from front end to back end, and it's all working congruently. That is the real excitement. And that's where we get into those next gen conversations around advanced data platforms, predictive analytics, and immediate transaction purposes.
I'm with you, Peter, on that. And one thing I might add is that none of that happens until you do digify your mailroom. I mean, you can do all this other stuff in our digital realm to be a more agile and fluid organization and really compete in the 21st century. But if your mailroom is still anchored in the 20th century, you'll never get to that end state that you're talking about. The Amazonification, is that how you put it?
Yeah, don't hold me to that word, but yes, that's
well, you can tell I'm making up words today. So, but I like that, the Amazonification. In other words, it's what is now is expected in the 21st century from organizations of any kind, of any leading acumen. Do you feel that then that what we're talking about today is really a huge enabler to that? And if so, where do you see that playing out in the future?
Yeah, so a couple good examples of that, but yeah, this is foundational to be able to get to these high speed, high scale, highly data intensive transactions. And part of the reason Amazon is able to do that is because most of the transactions we do up front are structured in nature, right? They're not getting in unstructured information that they have to quickly process and understand and route. Everything is a structured process for them. So if you think about, if we're going to take our traditional processes, a mortgage process, a claims process, and an AP/AR invoicing, HR documents coming on for onboarding, if we're going to get to that point, we have to move the structuring of that information as far upstream as possible to start that automation in play. And so the further that we can at that capture point, be able to automate the classification, the structuring, the extraction, and then the integration to those back-end automation and RPA and workflow systems, that's where we get to those single speed transaction points. So yes, I think, you know, again, we will start to see a shift away from physical assets, but external third-party resources are always going to require some unstructured documents coming in, right? And in any format, we can only structure so much up front, at least for now. So the more that we go upstream and structure earlier on, the closer we get to that Amazonification.
Yes, and I was thinking that as you were talking initially about the intelligent mailroom, that moving it up to that initial entry point, a mailroom, our traditional notion of it, perhaps is a good construct for that mental thought about how we capture information as soon as it possibly can be. A mailroom is the first point of entry of a piece of physical mail. So the further up that chain of input, the more value and the more power that has. But all right, I'm getting off into the weeds here. What, Peter, are some of the most important technologies and capabilities that we need to consider to make things intelligent?
Yeah, so we touched on a couple of them, right? Is artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to be a basis for a lot of this, right? And we're seeing when we think of AIML and how it's really being commercialized right now, a lot of that is in the structured chat, right? When you call into something and you have a machine talking back to your chat bots, and sometimes on those structured sort of data coming in. But where we've seen significant strides in the last 3 to 5 years is around the unstructured document understanding. So document understanding, classification, leveraging things like natural language classification and processing and understanding. So we've seen a big point in that, and that is going to be the precedent, because that is how we're going to understand, is this an HR document? Is this a mortgage form? Is this a claims document? What is this document? That is going to be the forefront, and leveraging the machines to be able to do that is the key to that. But from there, once that comes into play, it's one thing to know what a document is, but if there's no decision logic or intelligence behind, well, what do I do with this document now? You still lose out on all that speed. So things like robotic process automation, which can automatically extract information and route it and put some processes in place into back-end systems, that's going to become important, because again, we're starting to eliminate that traditional keyword typing or decision thought process in order to make sure where this document goes. And same with business process management tools and workflows, right? The moment we know what a document is and what information we need, they can route it and integrate it into the right back-end systems. But there's two more important components to this too. One is creating an open API architecture, right? We call it the API economy. And this is integral because, well, for two reasons. One is we're never going to be homogenous on the types of data platforms and processes and applications that we use. And more, we're seeing more innovation coming out, and we're relying more on these very niche applications and platforms and data capabilities. So you're going to need to be able to integrate and route with a multitude of incoming and outgoing types of applications. So the open API becomes important. And then lastly, and I'm sure this will warm your heart to hear, but it is important, is we need to have automated compliance, regulatory retention engines, litigation things or legislation put in place. Because if we're going to be creating such a large amount of big data, and we're going to be putting all this information into digital format, you can imagine how difficult that's going to become to apply proper retention policies, apply proper compliance and governance, and how long do we retain this for, and where do we route information, and how do we deal with privacy requirements on this. So again, we're going to need to rely on an automated engine so that we can apply all of those things as those documents are received.
Wow, that's an important point. Does Iron Mountain help with that automated compliance part of the process?
We do. We have a whole division set up around information governance to help with
Okay.
it. And you know, like a lot of things, we look at it from an entire information lifecycle management end to end. So from an advisory, different clients that we work with that are at different maturities in terms of their risk appetite structures and their policies and their taxonomies and classification schemas and that. So some folks have very defined retention policies and rules and classification structures. Some folks are still building those out as they go. So we've got a good advisory group that can come in and help build them and leverage the different requirements from a global and regional perspective. We certainly have a number of tool sets that are integrated into our platforms and can work with other platforms as well in order to apply those in an automated sense. And then working on defensible disposition of assets and storage of assets. So that full end-to-end spectrum we can help with. And again, a big part of that comes back to that understanding what a document is.
Well, I want to get back to kind of what you were, to sum up a bit. I think you had a very important model there you were talking about, Peter. You've got to know what it is, then you've got to decide what to do with it, then you have to act on that. And that's the overall process of the capabilities that are critical. But then the two enabling factors or big factors to consider is this idea of open API. You're right. I mean, we're not in a single language world, if you will. We all speak different languages, there's different ways to get things in and out. So we have to recognize an open API structure as a powerful tool. And then automating the compliance part of that, I think, is also critical, right? Because it can't be automated. The process won't be automated until that part is done as well. We talked a lot about this sort of the nuts and bolts of today. What about tomorrow? What are the opportunities on the horizon that you see here 2022 and beyond, not to just save money and ensure compliance, but also to bring a new competitive advantage to our organizations?
Yeah, and absolutely. And again, I think it's important to know that what we were talking about today, there's elements of that today, and it's continuing to evolve out. So I think a lot of what we talked about, that future state, that intelligent mailroom, is a journey over the next couple of years for people to get to. There's a lot of change that's going to have to occur in order to get to that. But you know, from an organizational perspective, it means a number of things. It means a lot of simplification, right? We're going to be able to remove redundant process or multiple processes across of it. So if you think about it, as we want to streamline more and more operations and more interactions we have with our clients, we really need to simplify what those processes look like. The big one is digital transformation. Right. And as we go through digital transformation, we need to think about what that really gets. Why are we going through digital transformation? And at the forefront of that should be because it's going to change the type of service and the type of client-facing interactions that you have. You're going to create more, faster, better, smarter interactions with your clients. So we're going to see a lot of that happening. Another big thing we talk to our clients a lot is around ESG. So the sustainability, the governance, the environmental impacts that we're having. And we make this change to be much less reliant on the traditional approaches things, to more reliant on automation and digitization strategies. We see that reverberation of impact down the line, right? So we see real estate consolidation, we see elimination of paper generation and storage. We see improvements in the types of processing that we do. So although we're using higher processes, it's really reliant on the cloud. So we're going to actually see some sustainability increases, some green impact out of the types of computer processing that we're having to do. And then, you know, we're always going to think about what the total cost of ownership is of something like this. So while we're looking at all of these offsetting benefits, we're definitely going to be looking at, you know, our ability to save money on operational efficiencies. We can leverage our teams in better, in different ways. So those are kind of the big things we talk to clients around is the digital transformation strategy and what are that impact. That'll help make a decision on some of the ways that we implement the technology, but simplification, sustainability, customer centricity, those are the key outcomes that everybody's focused on right now.
Do you feel that we're witnessing the evolution of the mailroom? In other words, as I said before, earlier, the 21st century mailroom, and if so, what are the impacts?
Yeah, I think so. It's a really exciting time for this. You know, for something as traditionally mundane as the mailroom, it's a very exciting time because you talked about it earlier. We're changing the very definition of what mailroom is, right? Anything coming in at any point is now considered a data ingestion point, right, where we traditionally think of it another way. So it's a very exciting time. And I think we're on the precipice of seeing this significant evolution kind of roll out at larger scale. And that's partly because the technology is improving, right? We're seeing these improvements in document AI and other technologies. We're leveraging more cloud and more. As one of the other things I think that is enabling this is more and more organizations are becoming comfortable with cloud, right? And if we're going to take advantage of these technologies, they're going to be cloud-based technologies. And so as we have kind of taken the constraints off the security issues and the regulatory issues around cloud, the timing has been right on that. And then in that, when we've built these platforms, we've also understood that this cannot just be technology focused, right? There are significant change management that needs to occur, but maintaining a hybrid approach with human in the loop is important right now. And I think we've found a good understanding of how that continuous improvement learning looks and that integration looks as we go through. So I think we're at a really exciting time. Mm-hmm. And you know, when we talk to clients, I think there's a big commitment and understanding that this is a necessary change, and we're heading in the right direction.
It is an exciting time, a confluence of a lot of disruption, but a lot of opportunity. The question is, are you going to be on board or get left behind? Right? I mean, it's going to happen. All right. We are speaking with Peter Nickel, Principal Advisor at Iron Mountain. I would like to remind folks that we will be having a Q&A here in just a few minutes. So if you have questions for Peter, please do. Let's take advantage of having an expert with us today on the topic of digital mailroom. So please feel free to bring your questions forward, and we'll try to get them here up with Peter here in just a few minutes. But Peter, before we do, can you give us an example of one use case or a particular organization that you feel has been particularly successful in this approach? What did they do? What were the results, and how can you do it too, or we do it too?
Yeah, I'll give two examples that I think probably provide a good understanding of both ends of the spectrum of where they are within that. So one of the U.S. state governments at the start of COVID fell into all those traditional constraints that we were talking about, right? Access to documents that were incoming and access to the facilities. To compound that, or you know, in addition to that, we saw a significant spike in employment claims. Right. So now the scale and the number of documents that were coming in and transactions that needed to happen from a claims perspective were on a significant rise, but their access to the facilities and the ability to manage it were on the decline. And so you saw, you know, use the term confluence of events. We saw this, and so we worked with them to very quickly turn around a solution that would be able to route those claims documents to us, meet all the security and regulatory compliance on it, and be able to start processing those employment claims within a matter of weeks. And so we got to be able to see, they were able to start using our content services platform, the Insight platform that you referred to earlier. And as you can imagine, at the start of the pandemic, and this is what's really interesting, obviously, is, you know, we talk a lot about the operational efficiencies and the impacts internally, but at its core, as we know, this was a hard struggle at the start of the pandemic. And so a lot of uncertainty around income and how we were going to manage for our families. And so the thought of delayed claims for employment is right. The difficult one. So this was a nice one. So that's kind of at that we were able to digitize and provide access so that they could be processed. The other end of the spectrum, and getting much closer to what we're talking about, is this concept of mortgage post-close as a service. And so when you think about when you put in your mortgage and all of the trailing documents that need to come in, and then all of them have to be classified, verified, validated, a lot of information extracted, it needs to go through auditing processes and then validated against back-end information so that they can be certified and serviced and finally end up in custodial services. So that process is traditionally a long, manually intensive, resource intensive process to happen. And so, you think about what does that impact? Well, it impacts the number that you can do per day. And as we've been going through a lot of refis occurring and sales, we've seen that uptick. But it also takes a prolonged period of time to cycle through, validate. And that can impact not just the back end financial institutions, but also the clients themselves as they're looking to close on new real estate and new houses for them and their families. So what we've been able to do is exactly some of the stuff we've been talking about, is how do we start to capture these documents, apply some of this next gen technology to automatically classify the documents, validate completeness and authenticity, extract all of the relevant information, compare it to the back end databases to verify that it's all correct, pass the auditing requirements, and then quickly turn those around. And so what we're seeing is obviously an improved amount of scale, but speed and accuracy as well. So again, both ends of the spectrum, very, very exciting things. And when you think about what we're saying there, while one is a claims for government and one is mortgage, you can quickly see how that is applicable to a number of use cases across a number of industries.
All right, very good, very good. Well, Peter, how does Iron Mountain help? Give us what are some next steps, and do you have any resources that you might suggest?
Yeah, so I think you guys will be providing some of the resources like our traditional white papers and access, but our traditional approach when we're looking at this is very advisory or consultative in nature. So what I would say is, reach out to your Iron Mountain client contact that you're interested in, and they'll set up an opportunity to talk to some of our subject matter experts on this, and we'll go through a traditional understanding of where you are currently. We'll put together discovery and design workshops, and we'll build out very methodical journeys with you that maximize results but limit the disruption and really take a methodical approach to it. So, we've got good resources, we've got videos, but the best way to work on something like this is in a very advisory kind of approach with your client, Iron Mountain client contacts.
That is Peter Nickel with Iron Mountain. You can find Peter and find out more at ironmountain.com. And now we would like to open up our session today for any questions from the folks that are attending today. Please feel free to take advantage of having a guest expert here with us to discuss digital mailroom. Peter, we do have some questions coming in. Does the digital mailroom also present solutions to the challenge of outgoing packages and mail for remote employees? How does that work?
Yeah, so the outgoing mail or outbound based mail is a bit of a different strategy, but if we have the ability to, as mail's coming in, have it captured and be much more structured, what that enables us to do is, if you think of traditional outbound mail, we're going to rely on a lot of internal information in order to compile and put those together. We can now start to alleviate some of the content creation, the build, and the output of that. The other side of it too is, as we start to enable more digital upfront, we can start to enable more digital output with our clients as well. And so it will allow us to be much more digital in terms of the outbound and eliminate even the having to create the physical outbound of it to a large degree. So they are a little bit different in terms of what it is in terms of the impact they make. But what we're trying to do is along that entire continuum, how do we enable much more to become digital? And that's again born on how much information do we have access in order to pull out, and how much have we enabled digital transactions and interactions with our clients.
Jacob is curious to see how offsite storage vendors will adapt to this new environment of electronic files versus physical. Well, Peter, Iron Mountain has some perspective on that. It will be impactful to offsite storage vendors.
It will, absolutely. And there's always going to be a place to maintain a gold copy or physical copy of very specific types of records, right? But part of the challenge that we've had, just to be blunt, is that we are carrying a lot of paper and documents that are out of retention requirements or have been put in there and commingled as a result. So I think, and then lastly, the reality is the evolution of this is it's forcing a change. And Iron Mountain has really embraced this change. You've seen a lot of what we're doing. We absolutely are still very much into physical paper storage and management and everything around information governance that does with it. But we've also acknowledged the fact that the world is going through digital transformation. And so I think what you'll see is, much like us, those offsite storage organizations will look to shift to other value-added services and other components across a traditional data lifecycle that they'll be able to provide services into.
Absolutely. That's one of the things we can admire about Iron Mountain. This is not a blockbuster. We're right. We are moving along with the times as well. Now, can you speak to some of the ways that digital mail and associated metadata is made available to folks for actioning? In other words, how does new mail receive tie into workflow systems and other lines of business systems?
Yeah, and there's a multitude of ways that we do that today. So one is that we've, and where we're working with a lot of our clients on is around one of these next gen content services platforms. And so the ability to capture the documents, enrich the metadata, either through what is captured, leveraging AutoML and some of those other pieces, but also integrating third-party data libraries in order to continue to enrich. We can get that enriched up front. There's two ways that we traditionally do. One is based off what we were talking about earlier, is those APIs, right? We'll integrate directly into backend applications, workflows, RPA systems, databases, repositories, et cetera. But in some cases with our clients, that first next step still maintains a little bit of a stage gate process. And so we can simply capture the documents, enrich them, and then structure them a very specific way that can be then output either into an SFTP site or through email or through a CSV export, and then they can leverage it as such.
What about a handwriting?
So handwriting is interesting. It's one thing everybody always talks about, and
I had to ask.
And absolutely. So, handwriting, I would say, is an improving function. We leverage multiple APIs from some of our vendors like Google and Amazon. We have some of our own proprietary algorithms that we've built out on handwriting, and we've seen some pretty impressive results. Not as good as typed out or formatted documents. But I think what we see with handwriting and where it becomes important is two things. And it goes back to something I was talking about before, is we can only be as reliant on the technology as where it is within its innovation spectrum. We do need to rely on humans. So, having that human in the loop ability so that when there are exceptions, when a machine doesn't come back with a high degree of confidence or accuracy on a result, we have a human in the loop presence to be able to do that. It's also important to note that humans can only read so much as well. So that it takes some institutional knowledge sometimes to understand that. And so we work with our clients a lot on a bit of training of the trainer, but also having them maintain resources that are part of these platforms so that when handwriting comes in that the machines can't do, that we've got that integrated approach.
Well, today, every human counts, every employee counts, right? It's a different world than we were in pre-pandemic. Now, with the impact of work from home and the different strategies for workflow, every physical person, to me, counts in maybe even a different way than they ever did before. And so that's why I like to ask, what about electronic signatures. Can you help me with that as well?
Yeah, so e-signatures, e-signatures are, there's two ways to look at e-signatures, right? There's a digitized signature on a piece of paper. That's relatively easy. There's lots of good capture capabilities around that and validating and verifying, not necessarily on the authenticity of whether that was pen or a digital representation of it. But if you think about where we're going from an e-sig perspective, when we think about Adobe or DocuSign or any of those sort of things, those integrating of those into the documents is important, and relatively integrated. But this is again why it becomes so important for us to have the ability to capture documents, understand what they are, and then validate that the signature corresponds to it in order to move it forward, and eliminate a stage gate process or a manual process associated with it. So if it's coming in a digital representation on a form, we can apply the same sort of concepts and modeling to it. If it's coming in through some of the new technologies, that integration, validation, understanding is very much a part of the process today.
All right, that is Peter Nickel, Principal Advisor with Iron Mountain. Check out the resources and of course, find out more at ironmountain.com. Peter, I really want to thank you for being our guest today. It's been a great discussion. And at this point, I think I want to turn it back over to Teresa for our closing comments.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I am going to come back with one last question each for Peter and Kevin. But right now, Peter had shared some next steps and recommendations that he suggested for getting in touch with the folks at Iron Mountain and how they can help you, but also how certainly AIIM has some recommendations for a next step. And that's one of the things I just wanted to mention out to you, just to check out joining AIIM Plus. We offer an annual subscription for all of the training that we offer is available on an annual subscription basis. And we are continuing to put additional training modules into this learning system every single month for you. And so I encourage you to go to aim.org/AIM-plus and just to learn more about everything that we have to offer in with training, in addition to our online community, and just to connect with other information professionals and have some really good discussions and conversations, and a lot of meetup groups that we have in there for talking about the very issues that Peter and Kevin have been sharing with us today, things with information governance and the importance of classification and data privacy issues. All of these things are so important for us to factor into our business plans and aligning those business plans with your organizational strategies. So come check out AIM Plus and learn more how to do that. So as Kevin said, we are getting at the end of our webinar time today. We have been recording the webinar, and we'll send you a link so that you can go back and listen to this again, and invite your colleagues to listen to it. Jessica is going to drop into the chat one more time, the link to the resources. Please take our feedback survey. I always value what you have to say. I do read every one of those responses, so do let me know what your thoughts are for that. And I very much want to thank our underwriter, Iron Mountain. Without support from our solution providers, AIM would not be able to bring you our free educational programs like our webinar series. So thank you very much, Iron Mountain. And so, as I said, I'm going to go back to each of our speakers and ask for just their closing thoughts today. And let me start first with Peter Nickel from Iron Mountain.
Thanks, Teresa. And once again, thank you very much to AIM for the opportunity, and to all the attendees that took part today. It was exciting. And I think that's the theme that I'll end on, is exciting. I think, as I said, we're on the precipice of a massive change, a necessary change for where we're going globally in terms of organizational structure around data. We've been using the term data is the new oil for a long time. And while that has been true, the challenge has been around accessing the data, processing the data, utilizing it, and really getting control of that. All will stay in compliant. And I think everything we're talking about today now by expanding out digital mailroom to intelligent mailroom is really the enabler to getting us to that utopian state.
Thank you. And Kevin Crane from AIM, your closing thoughts today.
It's been a great conversation for me. Listen, I managed large enterprise mailrooms, 3 states we had, and I'm familiar with having truckloads of paper coming and going from the loading dock. And the reality is a mailroom is still a big part of most enterprise operations. The question becomes, where are we going to take that mailroom in the 21st century? And that's what we talked about today. It's a big opportunity, and it's exciting to see organizations like Iron Mountain leading the way in making that happen. So I've been really pleased to hear what we have heard today, and I'm looking forward to more as we really use a mailroom as a construct for transformation, which is exciting.
Thank you. So this concludes our webinar for today. And this is actually the last webinar AIM is offering in our calendar year this year. And we will see you back on Wednesday, January 19th. We're going to be opening up with a mega webinar, multi-speaker, multi-presenter webcast for you. It's on Wednesday, January 19th. And so look forward to seeing you there with our next events, but have a wonderful holiday season. And thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.